Something else.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the truth.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. And there was all those flyers.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
We're a delightfully small group right now, so we can have lots of conversation. I assume that will fill in a little bit, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sue Swing, and it's my pleasure to coordinate the adult education program here at St. Matthew's. We have 3 really qualified, talented, passionate speakers today, so I'm not going to take too long with an opening devotion, but I will sort of try to set the tone for our morning today. Feel free to ask questions as we go, to shout stuff out. We're really here to learn from one another and to appreciate the information that's shared today by Laura Crave, Kayla Salata, and Patty Foley. I'm going to start with a resource that was helpful to me 20 years ago. We all have, I think, our thing with parenting, right? Like you, either you're looking for books or you're consulting with experts, and the information that's available to us just keeps getting better and better, I think. Yeah. But years ago when I first started parenting, my kids are 25 and 23 right now, what was really important for me was to be present with them. That's just something that always struck a chord with me. So I read this book and by John Kabat-Zinn and his wife Mila, and it's called Everyday Blessings, the Inner Work of Mindful Parenting. So I'm just going to read a little devotion from theirs and offer a prayer to our time today. So this chapter was on presence. Mom, you're not listening. Despite my seeming presence, I've been caught with my mind elsewhere. I'm pulled back only to wander off into creative mental explorations or into obsessive, mostly irrelevant, thoughts about future details. When a child walks in, can we take a moment and really see her and acknowledge her presence? We do that with acquaintances, but we often don't do that with those who are closest to us. The quality of our presence with our children is central to the quality of our relationship with them. Presence lies at the heart of mindfulness, and to cultivate it requires conscious, sustained effort, attention, a willingness to be authentic and awake and attuned. When we're authentic with someone, we are being genuine. We are not hiding or pretending. We don't discriminate against certain feelings in ourselves or in our children. But if we've grown up having to hide our feelings or dissimulate in order to feel safe, being authentic can be extremely scary and difficult. It may be new and unknown territory for us. And it helps to keep reminding ourselves, literally, to come back to our mind and to our senses. We remind ourselves to come back into the present moment, to be aware of how we're feeling. The breath can be our ally in this. Intentionally focusing on the sensations of breathing brings us back into the body. The more we are aware of how we are really feeling in each moment without judging ourselves, the more we embody authentic presence. And the more we live in this way, the more our children will feel it and know it and embody authentic presence themselves. Let us pray. So gracious God, just for now, may we be still and know that you are God. Your unfailing presence with us means that we are never alone in our relationship with ourselves and in our relationship with the young ones that you have entrusted to our care. Bless our faith family today and always. Amen.
Thank you very much, Sue. I swear she would have read what I was going to write because it talks a lot about some things I wish I would have known. I'm going to start. Again, my name is Kayla Salata. I am a social worker in child welfare. I've worked all my adult life with children and families. And I have a personal story to share about emotional regulation. I have a 10-year-old child, and sometimes, right? Sometimes I think I need to remember and maybe reread that chapter from Sue about just breathing. So I'm going to set the scene for my example. It was about mid-January. think we were scheduled, the three of us and Sue were scheduled to meet to start planning our presentation for you guys today, and we had a 7 a.m. soccer game. Very early. I'm not an early riser. My son is, but he also likes to have his time. He needs like an hour of him time to then function. There was none of that in that morning. He also has transitioned to playing goalie for the first time during this indoor season, so a lot of self-expectations he had, and whatever. So it was very, very emotional. Went to the game, it was fine, came back, letting him kind of decompress and everything, reminding him about 9 a.m., time to get ready for Sunday school. What? I'm not going to Sunday school. You didn't tell me I had to go to Sunday school. Emotions erupt, okay? So you guys can fill in the scenes of, you know, everything. And in my internal dialogue, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be late. I'm not gonna be able to meet with them. Like, who's to say that I should be presenting on this kind of stuff when this is going on? Like, you know, so taking a deep breath several times and letting him have his emotions. Asking him, help me understand. What is it that you don't want to, why you don't want to go to Sunday school? Well, I haven't gone in forever. Mind you, it was like the Christmas holiday, and then we had extended Christmas celebrations with various sides of the family, so he had been out of Sunday school for several months. He's like, I don't know who's there, and reminded him, you're in 5th grade. You know all the kids in your class. Well, I'm tired, and it's like, okay, you know. So letting him kind of vent, reassuring and validating, I hear you saying you're tired. I understand. We got up super early, played really hard. It was an awesome game. And I said, but it's still time to get ready for Sunday school. Crying, head down, like shutting down, you know, everything. I'm taking note of how he's reacting, and I'm also taking note of how I'm reacting. Because again, my internal dialogue is like, oh, I'm so sick of arguing. Just do what I tell you to do, is what I wanted to say. Knowing from past experience, unfortunately, that I've said that, it doesn't work. So taking the deep breath, taking some time to myself, coming back, noticing, I'm like, I see that you're upset. I'm sorry that we didn't remind you ahead of time. He very much is a planner, and if he doesn't know something's coming up, whew, we're in for the battle that I was engaged in. So I told him, I'm gonna get myself ready because I have a meeting to go to. You can take 5 more minutes, do what you need to do, and then I need you to go get ready. Get dressed, brush your teeth, you know, whatever. He did it, he didn't like it, but it was kind of a set the tone, disengage. That's very key. I don't know if either one of you will come back to that, but I've learned that we could continue to argue. I could continue to say what I want to say. He could continue to press and negotiate, I'll put, about what he wants and what he doesn't want. But learning to disengage and walk away was very important that I've learned in my journey of caring for him. So again, taking the deep breaths, validating, and saying, I understand, I hear what you're saying, but you know what, buddy, it's really important to mom and dad that you go to Sunday school. It's very important that you are around other peers and that you are learning about Jesus and God. Fine, I'll go to Sunday school, but I'm not going to church. It's like, well, buddy, we can't go to church during Sunday school because there is no church. So we missed the first service because of your soccer game, so we are going to go to church. And these 3 ladies can attest that he was right outside that window of our meeting, like, time to go, Sunday school was up. He had his coat and hat on, and he was bound to go home, but we made it, we went to church, all was good. And that's just one short little example of how emotions, right, can heighten, and we as caregivers of children sometimes don't maybe always check our emotions appropriately. I can attest to that many, many times. I mean, he can tell you that I am a yeller. And coming back to preparing for this, I'm not here to say I'm an expert, do what I say, and I'm human. I have faults, I don't always get it right. But I have the knowledge, I have the research, I have these wonderful ladies and the resources at your tables and at the table over there to kind of help remember that ways to check ourselves, check our emotions, and mirror what your child is kind of, well, obviously if he's in a crisis, I'm not gonna mirror that, but help mirror what I want from him. So if I want him to kind of help de-escalate, telling somebody, just calm down, doesn't usually work. So we need to give him, our children, the tools, and we need to give ourselves the tools. I did want to point out this is going to be at the resource table. It has ways to calm your child. I think Laura had brought it. And a few of them right off the bat, taking deep breaths. Oh yeah, I did that. Validate their feelings. Yep. And hugging and cuddling seems to work for my child. You might not want me to tell you that if he's in 5th grade, but that often helps just to kind of, I think the personal touch, kind of helps bring down the heightened emotions. Not every time, and when he's like escalating, I'm not, oh, come here, baby, I'm just gonna give you a hug. It's after the fact, when we've kind of calmed down and maybe tried some of these other techniques. So I'm gonna put this over at the table, and then I'm gonna have Patty come up and talk to you a little bit more.
Thanks, Kayla. Great. Yeah, thanks, Kayla, that's great. So as Sue mentioned, my name is Patty Foley. I am a child and family therapist. I worked for many years at Rogers Behavioral Health. In the last year, though, I transitioned over to Children's Wisconsin, and so I'm doing school-based mental health right now, which is, I think, the wave of the future. It's having the therapists right there in the school. And so rather than parents bringing kids to a clinic, like picking them up at school, pulling them out of class, bringing them to a clinic, bringing them back, we're right there in many of the schools. And so I'm really proud to say I'm a part of the school-based team. I have 3 kids of my own. I have a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an 18-year-old. Here today, I wanted to just review some of the things that were shared at the November presentation. Just by show of hands, how many people heard Ginny and Beth speak back in November? So, yes, a few of you. The other thing I'm wondering is, just again, by show of hands, for parents and grandparents, caregivers, I'm wondering the age groups of the kids that you've got in mind. So are there people here that it's 0 to 3 that you're kind of primarily, okay, a couple of you. What about elementary school age, kids or grandkids? Okay, and then middle and high school. Okay. Right now I'm working in the elementary schools, but prior to that I did a lot of, the bulk of my work recent years has been with middle schoolers, so just for frame of reference.
You skipped adults.
I'm sorry. We've got the adult children that are still living at home, possibly still coming to do laundry occasionally, have a meal, things like that, yes. Okay, so I hope that what I have to say then can kind of be applied to all those different age groups, but if you do have a specific question, like we said, raise your hand. There are some note cards we're going to be using on the tables for an activity later on, but if you think of a question and if you don't feel like interrupting right at that point, just write it down on the card and we'll get to it a little bit later. But Ginny and Beth had mentioned this concept of emotional intelligence in their talk, and I just wanted to return to a definition, a very basic definition, and the different parts of emotional intelligence. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about just things to keep in mind as we are helping to build our own and our children and grandchildren's emotional intelligence. So this concept is the ability to be smart about our feelings, our own feelings and other people's feelings as well. It involves being able to notice, understand, and act on emotions in an effective way. So that's kind of a really basic way to summarize the idea of emotional intelligence. There are 5 different parts, and we didn't do a PowerPoint, but if you're the kind of person who likes to write things down, I would say this would be the part, to write down. And I'm going to read it exactly how I have it written in front of me, that the 5 basic parts of emotional intelligence are, number 1, knowing what you feel. So being able to identify your own emotional experience, being able to label it appropriately, based on what your age is. Understanding how other people feel. So that's that concept of empathy. Another part of emotional intelligence is controlling your own responses to your feelings. So, and we'll definitely get to that part a little bit later when we look at coping strategies. Another part is being able to manage social relationships. And then the last part is being able to accomplish goals despite uncomfortable or difficult feelings. So that's kind of like a, you know, even though I don't want to get up and go to work, I'm going to go to work.
Next one again.
Being able to accomplish goals despite how you feel in that moment. So, so those are the basic parts. And so what we want to do is we want to try to support our children and grandchildren as they develop the different elements of their emotional intelligence. So some of these Ginny and Beth touched on, and some of the ideas I wrote down are, maybe they didn't mention, but I have them written down here. I'm just going to run through them. If, like I said, something, you have a question, raise your hand. Different ways to support kids in their development of emotional intelligence. Help them to label the different emotions. So we want them to build an emotions vocabulary. At the tables, there's a graphic with a bunch of faces. I think we have multiple copies if people want to take one home, but that's just one example of something you could use with a child or grandchild. They're different, it'd be different visual expressions or the different words. You know, that's one way to just help them to label things and build that emotions vocabulary. And then helping them describe where they might be or what might be going on in their life or when they'd be feeling those feelings. So I think at the door, was there a body tracing handout at the door? Did some people take that? So that's a tool that myself as a child and family therapist, I'm often using that with elementary kids where we're talking about where did you feel your anger, for example, and we're drawing that in on the body tracing. Or with a middle schooler, maybe not drawing it in, but talking about the different parts of your body and where might you be feeling that emotion, and then being able to label it. So that's one way to support the development of emotional intelligence. We also want to be normalizing the discussion of these difficult feelings. So instead of shying away from conversation about things like anger, things like hopelessness, things like guilt, feelings like guilt, we want to be open in talking about it. And whatever is a big deal to our child or grandchild in that moment, even if we can't figure out why it would be such a big deal, we want to be accepting of the fact that it's a big deal. So accept and understand those big feelings. Some of the words that I use with the kids in my practice might be your big feelings. Sometimes it's your difficult feelings or your uncomfortable feelings. So those are just some language, you know, that we can use. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, so what I'm hearing you say in that underneath is that just because it's not a big deal to me, it's a big deal to them. So
Right.
don't invalidate their emotions by saying, well, why are you so upset?
Right. Like, or you shouldn't, or it doesn't make sense, yes. Or even something that might have, like if a certain event triggered an emotion now, but it didn't in the past, it's kind of invalidating to say, well, the other day when this happened, this wasn't a problem. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. So, and yeah, so the idea is we want to normalize discussion and yes, not minimize, but rather validate. If you shy away from conversations about difficult feelings, then you're modeling that that's something that they should be doing as well. So we don't want to be shying away. Understand that for young children, the words aren't always going to be there, right? They're going to be communicating through their behavior. And so, and I think part of your example, Kayla, maybe fits in that when there's a child who's what we would call emotionally dysregulated, which is a fancy word for sort of like having a freak out or whatever, that's not going to be a time where we're going to be able to effectively get them to tell us with their words calmly what's going on, whether they're a young child or even an older child as well. Like, oftentimes it is just being able to be mindful or watchful of the behavior. And when we get into the talk about coping skills, some of that is just even recognizing what comes before those big blow-ups so that we can help to contain things before it gets that far, if that makes sense. What else do I want to cover? Avoiding judgment of difficult feelings. So it's not the feeling that would be bad, right? It might be that when we're angry, we don't hit. So that behavior is something that we want to extinguish. But it's not wrong to be angry or upset. It's how we show our feelings. So we don't want to be labeling feelings as bad. We want to model healthy management of our own emotions, so keeping in mind that children and grandchildren are always watching us. they're learning from us. And in fact, if we notice ourselves making, I guess mistake is the word that comes to mind, but if we notice ourselves becoming dysregulated ourselves, then to say, oh, you know what? I think I need to take a little bit of a break right now. I'm gonna go sit down on the couch over here. So to sort of talk that out loud as a way, again, to model that you're recognizing when you yourself might need a little bit of a break or timeout is gonna be something that they're going to pick up on because they're watching us, they're listening to us.
Annie,
Yes?
can you talk about that a little bit more? So like in the moment,
Yeah.
if you have a child who's maybe 3,
Yeah,
they're not gonna stop.
no.
You're not gonna get your break, you
Yes.
know? How do you manage?
Yes, and so, and I think we are getting to that because we are going to talk, I'm really excited because Laura's going to tell us about the brain and it's going to be really cool. And I think everyone's going to have a wonderful understanding of some of the language we can use in those moments, or like at what point do we be our child or grandchild's frontal lobe, which is one of the things we're going to talk about shortly. So hold that thought, and if we don't answer that, then ask us again. Does
It's
that
too
make
late
sense?
now, this was 23 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It comes back to you. You know, if you slip, I heard for like, I don't know, like months, just leave me alone,
Yes.
to my 3-year-old,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it just came out one time, I got
Yes.
this, you know, baby strapped to me and she's doing stuff and it just came out and,
Yes.
yeah, so that was her go-to response for,
Oh, leave me alone.
hopefully she's over it now.
And as her mom, then you were you became the expert on that, and you knew what that meant. Like it wouldn't matter. You knew what it. You knew that it meant something was coming, or something, or this is going to be rough on me as the mom. Yeah. So let's see if with Laura's, because I'm really excited with what you have to share. Okay. So what else do I have written? Oh, we want to also support our child or grandchild's practice of self-regulation. And so this comes into with some of the coping strategies, which are also on the tables, and there was a specific handout with check boxes that was at the front table, and so we're going to get to that a little bit later as well. Remember that your feelings are not the same as your child or grandchild or loved one. So something that might make you feel anxious, let's just be careful not to project that onto our kids and assume that they feel the same way in a situation as we do. So just be mindful of that as well. I'm a big fan, especially with the children I see in therapy, of using books and occasionally movie clips to sort of illustrate different things like labeling of emotions or how we manage emotions. I do have some books on the table, so when we're finished, if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, for different age ranges, but I love them and they're very useful to me in my practice. And some of the storybooks are things that very naturally could be used, you know, at bedtime, reading stories about feelings. So can I turn it over to you, Laura, and your brain science, because it's really exciting stuff. I love it.
Good morning. So I got a brief introduction, but again, my name is Laura Crave, and I have a similar background to these folks. I have some education in social work and have worked for Children's Wisconsin in a variety of different roles. But one of my passions is how our brains work. Like, it's really great to know, okay, we should reflect the emotion and these are some things we should do, but I'm the person that says, why? Why does that work? Or why doesn't it work? And there are times when I'm working with parents, caregivers who say, this sounds really touchy-feely and kind of fluffy, and I don't think it's gonna work. So that's why I like to give the why of the reason we're telling you these things instead of just saying, go ahead and do this and try this. So before I dive into that, I'm gonna invite you to turn to a couple people that you're sitting near, or if you want to move somewhere else, and tell them about a time that either you or a person in your life had one of those moments. Those moments where your emotions got up here and you did not show your best behavior. What did that look like? What did that feel like? Just let's take about 2 minutes and think of that example.
As an adult?
Everyone.
Yeah, I guess so. That's a difficult thing for me. We all just lose control.
I mean,
Everything.
there's that two time like kid would do something like a scream when they tell them to stop or
I think I remember
go
one
to
of my
thinking
20s,
why she's doing
somebody-
that or even
in my
that.
20s, there was just
I think that's maybe
man,
what she's talking about, like the way we react to it.
I don't have children of my own, but I was a teacher of children. Yeah, there were times when I lost control of myself.
Yeah, she's normal.
Well, I know there was,
Wait, but I was very
you know,
immature.
27.
I'm so
Oh
sorry.
my goodness.
Yeah. No, I don't think I scared
When
her.
she
I
was
just think we
3, she's
realized
now
that there's
4.
nothing gonna come of it. We were both young.
And she wanted to ride her bike down the sidewalk, and there were lots of, there was an alley near the business. And I said, "We're not doing that." She thought it was funny.
That's really British
And I freaked out, and I
Right out my
ran
house.
to catch me. And I was kind of taken back. Because I've never been that firm.
He was actually more childlike.
And I brought
I
her
always felt
and
myself to be very easy, but once I remember when I was starting, I'm more of a flight person.
I was trying to calm her.
I remember one time a child found me around the house, I finally said, "Mommy needs a tight hug," and I went into the bathroom, and they see these little fingers under the door. I'm like, no, go back. More of a flight person, so I showed them.
Inside, because I was
There's no
afraid.
these rage moments.
I was right there, O'Reilly, you know, auto parts store where they zip in and out.
Like, I was
And I freaked out.
I had one on my plate.
But
Oh,
we
you're
didn't
see
see
it.
it.
Your morning is really, please listen, I really had to say
And
it like
she
10
didn't
times.
run after her.
They're about to abandon
And she has better knees.
And we really
And I sacrificed my knees to
About
run.
1 more minute.
And then
But like the one actually. Yeah, they get a warning.
And I thought, I don't care what you say, you do it. This is mine.
Happened before.
So
Do it, coming.
I handled that well.
Here we go. You chose
You're yelling at my
I can
kid.
only say it 10 times
My
without
granddaughter,
getting cut.
you didn't do it.
Right, guys.
It's my call, you know. I think
But probably not best practice.
In my mind, one of the children has issues with allergies, and his parents don't do it.
I think we'll start coming back together as a larger group.
For dinner. I said, let's go down, I will take a couple
Yeah.
of quiz, let's do it together.
So I love to eavesdrop on people's conversation, but I only caught a few key words, and I feel like I'm missing a lot of the story behind some of these things. So I'm wondering if I could hear from maybe 1 or 2 people what emotions came up in this scenario and what the reaction was. You don't have to say who the person was if you don't want to put that out there, but.
We use the word rage, and it's not a joke. Like, I don't know, bedtime, bath time, getting out of the house every day, like 0 to 60 in, minutes, seconds, and how you come down from that. I don't know. And how it sets a not good tone for them the whole day. Like, feels awful to drop kids off at daycare knowing that you just were rageful in your own behavior. So, yeah.
Thank you. That is the word that I heard and wanted to know more about. So. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
For me, it just, we were dealing with anger and rage too, but it just how much we both have nurtured where there's such a value of control.
Oh, sure.
And modeling in our parents, who's never got angry. They were
Oh,
always.
they got it.
Yeah, but it was never approved.
Yes. I'm going to jot myself a note because I'm going to come back to that. So with those examples in mind, I'm going to walk you through what may have been happening in your brain or your person's brain in that moment. We're not going to go like neuroscience deep. This is going to be really high level of what's happening in our brain. So I'm going to invite you to bring out your hand, and this is going to be your model of the brain. So in our brain, we have the brain stem that's going to come up to the middle, and then in the center of our brain, you're going to put your thumb. And this is one of the earliest parts of the brain that's formed. It is the part of our brain that helps to keep us alive. So that is our brain's number one task every day when we wake up, is stay alive. So one of the things that can happen, this is going to be our amygdala, is this is where our fight, flight, and freeze lives. So in moments where our brain perceives a threat or something different or something out of the ordinary, that part is going to be activated, our fight, flight, or freeze. So then in calm moments, on typical days, you can bring your fingers around, and this is going to be your cortex, your prefrontal cortex. And that lives up in the front of your brain here. This is I think the coolest part of the brain. This is the part that lets us think and make a plan and reason. It's the part that helps us weigh consequences about, should I take this cookie before dinner? What might happen? Is someone going to find out? That's the part of the brain that's weighing all of that. A really important thing to know about this part of the brain is that it does not fully develop until we are 25 or 30 years old. So I will self-disclose that I barely have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. And I love that reminder because there are times when we have high expectations for our little people that they think and plan and reason the way that we might. And they truly cannot do that because their brain is not developed in that way. The other piece to know about our brain is just like muscles in our body, the more that we use them, the stronger they get. So if we have a little person or a grown-up who is really often going through changes or things that they perceive as threat, that part of their brain is going to go really strong. And they're going to get really good at some of those fight, flight, or freeze behaviors. And what I mean by that might be some of that rage, some of that fight. Some of the flight, you might see young people or adults who kind of retreat back on their own. And freeze, my other F. That might be when you're asking someone a question and they just are not there. They're not responding. You ask them a bunch of times. It's because their brain is perceiving something's going on that I'm not okay with. This could be something like, uh-oh, I just got called on in class and I don't know the answer. You're gonna flip your lid, your prefrontal cortex is no longer engaged, and you're just gonna be depending on those, stay alive in those moments behaviors. So I think that's a great point about what seems like a big deal to me with my fully developed prefrontal cortex might be a huge deal for someone else or for a young person. So what do we do with that? Because it's not an excuse to just say, oh, we're gonna constantly be flipping our lid and our prefrontal cortex is gonna head out of here and we're gonna be fight, flight, or freeze, because we know that's not gonna be helpful to get through the day. So we have to figure out ways to strengthen that other part of our brain, to strengthen that prefrontal cortex. And I think I have a lot of analogies, but I'm gonna ask you, let's say that somehow a fire gets set in your house. And you have this situation where there is this fire. What is your first course of action? What do you do?
Extinguish it.
Extinguish the fire. Yes. So that's your number one priority always. Then you might get into, okay, we have this fire, we gotta revisit some fire safety, what do we got going on? Something happened. But always extinguishing that fire. And so the same goes for our kids and our loved ones in our life, is we have to extinguish whatever that fire is before we go into teaching or trying to talk through a situation. Because if we're burning with whatever that feeling is, we're not going to be able to learn and grow new skills. So the moral of that story is we want to take all of the other not on fire opportunities to strengthen that prefrontal cortex. So this is where practice comes into play. We can practice our emotional regulation before we get to those really big feelings. If you think about, I'll say some of the areas in your life that it's maybe okay or not okay to have emotions. Tell me about that. Are there any places where it seems a little more acceptable than others?
Well, watching TV and the news, then it's okay to vent.
You can vent, okay. So you might be in your own home or in a place where you feel like you can let those things out, okay. Go ahead.
If it's a safety issue.
It's a safety issue, okay.
In the close of relationships.
Yeah, the close relationships. Where are some places you feel like maybe emotions shouldn't go to?
Work.
Work, that's what I was looking for, yeah. Anywhere else?
I think Stephanie would say road rage.
Road rage, yeah, not a safe place to do that. Okay. So where I'm going with this is that throughout your day, there are places where you feel okay letting your emotions out and other places that you might keep them in. And what can happen is if you think about holding a spring between your fingers, and every time you have emotions in a place you can't let them out, you have to squish them down. And you squish this spring down more and more throughout your whole day until maybe you get to the end and it explodes. But if we are taking opportunities throughout our day to feel a little emotion and let it out, feel a little emotion, let it out, we won't have this big explosion, and we're strengthening those parts of our brain. So what does this look like? It might look like blowing bubbles for someone. It might look like wiggling your body. If you've ever seen a kid who just like lays on the floor and wiggles, that's actually emotional expression. And as adults, it's not really acceptable for us to lay on the ground and wiggle around, but it is good for us. So as we continue forward, we're going to talk about ways that we can build into our own life and with our little people, our loved ones, what those little ways are that we can release our spring so that we're not getting to the point where we have that big explosion. One more piece that I don't think I mentioned about the brain is the prefrontal cortex is where you process language. So if someone has flipped their lid and they're in fight, flight, or freeze, they're literally not processing what you're saying. So if you are asking more questions or giving more directions, it's not getting through. So again, back to that, put out that fire and then we can have some of those conversations. I want to pause before we move forward because that brain piece might be newer for some of us. What questions do you have? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, if you have a 4-year-old who you bring to a new school that might be their school, and this just happened to my daughter,
Okay.
and you want her to say hi to the teacher and she just freezes. And she won't acknowledge the director or anything. Why? I mean, she's loquacious. She doesn't have to do that. Is she afraid or?
I can guess, I can make a conjecture, but I go back to that brain science of I'm in a new place. I don't know who these people are. I maybe don't understand why I'm being asked to do this. I'm not gonna say hi. If all of those things are going on, we have flipped our lid, even if it isn't, explosive behavior, to be able to stop and think, hi, hello, what does that mean? Who am I talking to? That's a lot for a little brain to come up with and go through. So it is some of that resetting. Before we say hi, maybe we need to wiggle it out. Maybe we need to jump down the hallway. Because all of those behaviors and ways to move our body and re-engage our brain are really effective ways instead of let's talk more.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that she's shy, she has a low self-concept. I mean, that might not be it.
No, not at all. Would you add
Well,
anything to that?
that's
Yeah.
one, right, that's one snapshot in time in a new place. I'm guessing that when she didn't say hi, did she also maybe get physically closer to mom or something? Like sometimes with the little kids, not only do they not speak, but they're sort of like they need to be really close to their loved one just because they need to feel safe and secure in that moment. And so I would say, like, probably the thing to not do then when you get in the car with that child is, why didn't you say anything? I think that would not, right? That's gonna take some time. If there's a, pattern of that kind of behavior in any situation, no matter if it was familiar or unfamiliar, that's different than sort of a first time, right? That this is something new to me. Had you used before also the concept of like, the prefrontal cortex as like your guard dog too? Like some of the other language that we can use with our kids, some of that really engaging language to even help them understand, hey, right now, you flipped your lid, like we need your guard dog to be in place to watch over it, right?
So this is one of my favorite visual concepts. That's why I had you all do it. Because there might be a person in your life that you don't sit down and say, well, in your brain right now, you are doing X, Y, Z.
Right.
But if you've talked about it ahead of time, this says pretty clearly, uh-oh, I flipped my lid. Or if you're a parent, to be able to say, instead of saying, I need a break, I'm gonna go to this other room, we're not gonna say any more words to each other, this says it all. And for our younger people, usually around like maybe 3 or 5, they might understand that their amygdala is their guard dog. And so this is the guard dog that helps keep them safe. And their prefrontal cortex is their wise owl that helps them make good decisions. And sometimes when our guard dog gets really activated and excited, it becomes this barking dog and it scares away our wise owl. And we're not making those good decisions anymore. So it takes, right, people like go to school for neuroscience. They know all these crazy things, and we have a barking dog and a wise owl. But it really, especially in times where sometimes we don't know why we're reacting the way that we are, and our young people don't know why they're reacting the way they are. So giving them some power over, yep, it really makes sense. You've got all this going on. You have this new situation. Yeah, we get it. We're here to support you and here to help you. So that's where that moment comes, where if you have someone in your life who has flipped their lid, their wise owl is gone, you might be able to step in and play that part of the brain for them. So that might be a time where you say, hey, I think right now we're gonna go jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes. Or right now, we're not gonna be able to do this, and be able to co-regulate along with them. Go ahead.
Yeah, with brain, I appreciate brain development, but also multiple intelligence, that we learn so differently. And we are so programmed in the language, right brain, left brain, and people can't learn unless they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Bouncing on a ball is the way they learn. And is that becoming more embraced?
I think so. If you look at classroom settings, like especially elementary classroom settings from like 20 years ago, and you look now, we have like different types of seating. We have different like zones. It used to be you sat at your desk in your hard bottomed chair, and you could do it any different.
Boys and girls, girls. It's all brain stuff.
It is all brain stuff. And I'll share as I bring Kayla on up too, that it's not just for our kids that need that stuff. So I actually have a little tag that I wear on my badge at work that is my emotional management tool. Because there are some times in my work where things are really hard and I don't say, Laura, take a deep breath right now, or why don't you call someone and talk it through? So I write those things down So in my flip my lid moments, I don't have to think about what to do, I can just check my list. So we are going to give you all the opportunity today to start building your own toolkit. It's not about doing everything perfect every single time, it's about having something that you can look at, having a resource for yourself. And also you can do this with your kids, because to your point, I might need to call someone and talk. My fiance says, leave me the heck alone. I'm going to go do whatever for a few minutes. So it's all about knowing what's in the other person's toolkit as well, so that we can give them what they need, not necessarily what we need in that moment. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I will have Kayla come on back up.
Does everybody have a pen? If not, we can get you some. So there are large index cards at your table that you can use. If anybody wants more, feel free. There's also some resources at your table. One that I want to suggest, if you did not grab this sheet on your way in at the table by the door, you might want to take a look at that as well. So this one is some coping tools of what helps me. It's like a checkbox with some pictures. And then I believe at the tables there should be a list with multiple columns. Yeah, that starts with patterned and repetitive. Have a bunch of different activities. So kind of going back into my professional history, I started out working as a treatment foster care case manager. So treatment foster care, how that differs than what we maybe some would call general foster care, is treatment foster care is those children that have like the exceptional behavioral needs or exceptional medical needs or sibling groups or teenagers who may encompass all of the behavioral needs. So at my agency, we talk a lot about pattern repetitive behavior. So what does that mean? So it's activating that lower brain stem that Laura had talked about, and we talk about dosing. So it's repetitive behaviors that are kind of self-calming, self-regulating, and we do it, and maybe not every day at 5 o'clock, but you're gonna do it a couple times a week during those non-crisis times. And so that's gonna help maintain the baseline, because as you're starting to see a child start to go up that escalation chain, start to get emotional, we kind of talked about like where they're feeling in their body. I think we know, you guys are the experts of the children in your care, right? You've seen them explode, you've seen them flip their lid, you've seen them fly far, far away. And so kind of watching for those warning signs, right? You know, whether it's behaviors, things that they're saying. So if we do the dosing of the pattern repetitive behaviors on a regular basis, that kind of helps maintain that baseline, and especially if we're starting to see a couple of those behaviors as the lid is starting to go up, that's when we can try to engage them on something that we know that works. So how do we know what works is it takes some practice kind of going through some of these. So for my son, you know, maybe go run. Let's go shoot some hoops. So it's playing the basketball. It's not, so these coping skills, it's very important that we don't view them as rewards. When you're throwing a fit and having a meltdown and completely embarrassing me in the store, no, I'm not gonna let you go play basketball or go do whatever. So it's hard to shift that mindset, because I know a lot of the foster parents that I work with is that, well, no, they shouldn't have the privilege of doing X, Y, Z because they destroyed their room, they destroyed my house, they broke, you know, whatever. So it's really kind of having that perspective shift of, obviously their lid is up, they can't engage with rational demands, rational thinking, rational talk. So allowing them to do something that's going to help regulate and bring that emotion scale down, and then they can talk, then they can process. So I want you to go through the tools at your table, or have discussions if you want with those at your group. I know, or at your tables. I know we have just a couple minutes left. But it's important to know, as a caregiver, what helps me calm down. So you've heard the three of us kind of talk about, maybe I just need to step away, maybe I need to take a break, maybe I need to call somebody. So knowing what you as a caregiver needs, and then kind of going through it with the children in your care as well of, you know, you're kind of processing, okay, like when I have some calm music on, maybe the lights are dimmer, that's when my child is not going to be flipping their lid. Knowing that if it's a new setting, do they have a lovey? Do they have like some sort of like fidget, a tactile something or other? Like can they play with slime, or can they like squeeze a stress ball? Does that help them in new unfamiliar settings be okay? And it's again, in the new age classrooms, it's amazing to walk into my son's classrooms. I mean, there are swivel chairs, there are a lot of tactile stuff like throughout the room, that each child has their own, what works for them and what doesn't. So I'll let you guys just kind of look through those, and then we'll open it up to any questions, and we're available for discussion if that works. But yeah, I want you to guys make sure that you have the tools, the resources that you can take, and or right now, I'm a big proponent of any learning activity that you're gonna walk away with application. So utilize us while we are here, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, this is for us. Step it closer, what helps me.
I know, do we have some people that need to pick up for Sunday school?
Yeah.
And I would say too, like, if you, for the note cards also.
If there's something that you really hope that we could provide in the future, like dive deeper into certain topics, if you don't mind, write them down and leave them with one of us or on the table. We would appreciate any feedback as far, because there are just so many of these topics you could talk for a long time. And so what you think would be helpful as like a next step for adult ed would be really great for us to know. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. These are all like super good in theory and talking about like when you're calm, practice these things and do all these for self-regulation, but could you talk briefly about like in that moment of a 2 or 3-year-old or even 8-year-old, 5 and 11-year-old, in the moment of explosion? So many parents are like, what do? You can't talk to them, they're already gone, right? Like they're already whatever. What are some things like I've heard, put in a safe spot in their room, close the door, sit them down, whatever, like what else? Because sometimes that just doesn't work. Like if a 2-year-old is flailing and on the ground and like, what can you do for that?
I personally really like things that are going to snap our brain into a different setting. So sometimes that's a change in temperature. So if you have ice packs or ice cubes or things that go from like literally feeling hot to feeling cool, that can change our brain to be able to get into a different state. Other things like, if you can catch it before it gets too crazy, like join in the like, we need to move our bodies, let's all move our bodies, let's do it in this safe way together. And for, did you say 8 years old is potentially? Yeah. Okay. That I would say is getting to an age where we as a society more often say like, don't wiggle like that, don't move like that, don't do those things. So like just saying, okay, do it, like just do it, get into that safe space. I also like change in taste. So like eating something sour can make your brain switch to a different setting. Again, that seems super counterintuitive. Like you're having a tantrum and I'm gonna give you sour candy, what? But sometimes that's just what's needed for those moments to make some switches.
Yeah, some of it is about tapping into the different senses. It also probably makes a difference whether you're in public, at home, what happened beforehand, what's going to happen after. Like I appreciate the question, and there are so many factors that play in. So I think it's important to pay attention to what was going on beforehand, what's being planned afterward. Is there an audience? Because in some cases, removing the audience can change that. And then other times, maybe you need to physically be right next to that child to physically calm them from, right? So I feel like the answer, I wish there was like one super duper easy answer, and boom, here's, right?
Different for every child.
But yeah, and if that's something that, like if it could be beneficial for a group to get together and sort of like, let's talk about that, like we'd be happy to plan something.
Give a piece of chocolate.
Give a piece of chocolate. I'll take a piece of chocolate.
That works for us.
So one thing I'll offer too on the resource table, one of the programs that I work closely with at Children's is called Triple P Positive Parenting. And they offer a variety of one-on-one sessions or workshops, group sessions that cover specific topics. So they have dealing with disobedience, they have raising resilient children, they have coping for parents, as well as they now have classes focused on teenagers as well. We don't want to forget our teenagers. So if there are some areas of your life that we did not cover, I would encourage you to check that out as well.
Because those are pre-recorded online, and there's a whole curriculum you can go through, all free, all online.
Yep, so they can do them in person if you're in the Milwaukee area. They can do them on Zoom if you want to be live interaction. There's a lot of different options for that.
So yeah, there's a flyer on the table.
Yes.
Definitely take that.
Have there been studies on, I just watch social media, how kids deal with their emotion with their cell phones.
Yeah.
And has there been a study on that? Because that's something that concerns me a little bit. There's a way that they're coping,
Right.
TikTok or whatever.
I wrote it down, I'll give it to you. I found the director of one of the National Institutes of Health, one of their child development specialties, has a blog. And just a couple weeks ago, she did a blog post about social media and development. So I have it written down. I'll give you the link and you can check it out.
Teenagers.
So interesting, I was on my way to work today and there's a big billboard, first time I saw it, and it's a challenge to cut down on your cell phone use, like 5 minutes,
by
or 1 hour a day,
and
or
it's
whatever.
US Cellular, it's a cell company that's promoting that.
And I feel like it's like cigarettes, right? We're gonna make this great product, now we're gonna tell you not to use it. And how confusing that is to people, but I think you're totally right. It definitely, in adult kids, I have adult kids who have been, part of this generation of social media and information technology, and they don't have they didn't learn the people skills. Or less learning of the people skills than we, and that includes relating and communicating and interacting and understanding and one-to-one as opposed to,
So I'm glad you pointed out that coping is sometimes using a phone, because sometimes we unintentionally take away people's coping skills. So maybe we don't agree that the phone should be a coping skill, but if we take that away without giving new coping skills, that's where that eruption comes from, is now we don't know what to do. So really being mindful about having lots of tools in our toolbox, so that if one goes away, we have our others. Yeah. So we will stick around on volunteering us, but we can answer some more questions, or if you have other thoughts, let us know. But thank you for being here, and thank you. Yes, I would say the only thing not to take are Patty's books.
Just don't take them.
Oh, do you want to write?